One Mr. Andrew Erickson, Fantasy Pros, Betting Pros, joining us here. We're switching gears. Let's talk football. How are you, my friend?
I am doing excellent, Matt Perrault. So happy that you reached out to get me on the show. Look, the calendar is August. You're talking about this baseball thing. I'm like, dude, I'm locked in. When are the Eagles visiting the Patriots for joint practices? I've already circled it on my calendar because I want to see AJ Brown against these Eagles defensive backs who would like to be very, very chippy because we're not going to see any of that in the preseason game. So I am super excited to talk fantasy here on the show with you, man.
It's wild, too, because the Hall of Fame game's on Thursday. And I think as you hit August, yes, baseball is on people's brains, but I think the collective will tell you that it's football season and people's attention is starting to gravitate towards their own fantasy football teams, their own football team as to what it's going to look like. What is life like for you right now, though? Because I don't think people realize how much research and how much work you have to do right now. Because for fantasy pros, this is go time, right? This is your most important period.
Some might even say, and to quote our great leader, Andrew Sears, crunch time for us here in the Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros streets with the NFL season coming up. So yeah, it's crazy. Every single day, it's updating rankings, adjusting for things because of injuries. We're already having guys get hurt. Ricky Pearsall obviously was the big news last week. So that has a ripple effect of how you now address the 49ers. Do you have to move Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel? Now he's thrown into the mix. So every single day, it's monitoring these training camp reports, figuring out these injuries. So we are locked in and you got to be ready to go. So I'm amped.
What do you make? Let me ask you this way. In terms of roster building for teams, for people, for fantasy football teams, how much do you recommend people to be like deep in the weeds? Or do you think it could be something where, hey, 2 or 3 days before your draft, you just start to compile some information? How have you seen success over the years? Is it the people that go deep and today they're drafted like on August 24th and they're already 4 books in? Or is it the guy that shows up with 2 or 3 days worth of prep work, comes in and does well?
Well, I think you can have success in both ways. I think that from speaking from myself, I'm in the weeds. I mean, I've been drafting teams since basically like March, before the NFL draft even kicked off. So I think that that's just something that because I enjoy this stuff so much, like this is a passion for me. And I'm just so happy that it is also my full-time job. But with the tools that we have at Fantasy Pros, you can also be in that other bucket where you just kind of show up, you have the expert consensus rankings, you have the draft tools, and you should be good to go. Now, I do think that a little bit of prep beforehand, even if it's like a day or two before, just running through some simulations with our draft wizard, I think it's just the best way to get an edge because you're just going to find out where players will be available when you pick, especially if you know, oh, I'm picking in my snake draft. I'm the 11th overall pick. Run through some simulations, just kind of get familiar with the names that will most likely be on the board by the time you pick. Kind of write those down, jot those down. And again, we have cheat sheets that you can follow my rankings, Fitz, Debro, everyone over at Fantasy Pros. So again, if you don't want to put in the work, we do it for you. And using the tools makes it really easy. I know we have a free trial going on right now. So go check it out, fantasypros.com/free trial.
I'm not trying to shill for our company, but you guys know I work for both companies. I work for Pushing the Odds and I also work for Betting Pros. But Fantasy Pros, you guys do an incredible job doing. Debro's gonna be on the show a lot this year as well. I am curious. I'm not trying to bash anybody else for their own, but I've seen people be very negative towards other people's rankings, like the free site rankings. How different is it when you guys go behind the paywall on Fantasy Pros and you start using those tools? How much different is the information that you guys make available on Fantasy Pros versus the free stuff that's available on the internet?
So a lot of it goes to the full expert consensus rankings, which are behind the premium subscription to Fantasy Pros, where you're not just getting my rankings or Fitz's or Debro's, it's across the industry. Anyone that has submitted their rankings through the expert platform, which is really good for analysts. Again, how I kind of keep track of everything. There are some rankers, if you're not using the analyst tools, that are doing this in like Google Sheets. And I cannot imagine how annoying that must be to try to like drag and drop all these players, copying, pasting when you have this great expert platform tool. So it makes things like, okay, Ricky Pearsall is out. We get a red Q tag for him saying, okay, he's going to be out. We got to move Deebo Samuel up the ranks. How do we affect Brock Purdy? So that's one of the big advantages, I think. Do you get access to all those types of rankings along with other premium things? And I think too, with the draft wizard tool specifically, you can then sync up multiple and more leagues. So if you are in a situation where you're playing like 10, 12, 15 fantasy leagues, like you need this premium subscription because like that's really what's going to help separate you because yes, you can free your one league for free on the mock draft simulator. And that's definitely the first step. But if you really want to dive in deeper, getting all the information, especially with like draft intel, where you can get information about your league mates and their draft history. And, oh, this guy always drafts a Patriot 2 rounds ahead of ADP. Go figure. It's a New England draft. So again, I was using the mock draft tool before I was even associated with Fantasy Pros in any way, shape, or form. I remember I would be doing this in my college dorm, trying to be like, all right, I can get Keenan Allen in round 3, and then another name, Jeremy Hill, former running back for the Bengals.
Wow.
Like, I can get him in round 2 as a sophomore. He was obviously a bust, but it's a great tool, and there's no better way to get prepped for your specific draft because it also syncs your league settings. So PPR, half PPR, keepers, it's all done for you at a click of a button.
So when you go to spring training, you work on things like bunting, you work on things like what bases to cover, you work on things like, hitting the right cutoff man, right? So what are just the basic blocking and tackling strategic things that everyone playing fantasy needs to know before their draft?
Value-based drafting, I think, is probably the most important thing to remember when you're going into your draft and to not react to gut feel or runs on certain positions. You're trying to extract as much value as you can. So that's where the rankings come into play, where there may be a guy falling like a stone because of XYZ reason. But if he's the top guy on the consensus board, then that's probably going to be a good pick when you look back on it. Some of the best picks I've made were not necessarily always players that I was going out of my way to try and acquire. It was, well, everybody else hates this guy, and right now he's a screaming value. One of the greatest cases of this a couple of years ago was Josh Jacobs. And he played in the Hall of Fame game, and nobody wanted him. Everyone was like, this guy is dead on arrival. Nobody wants Josh Jacobs. He's fallen like round 7, round 8, round 9. And eventually it was just like, look, I don't love this player, but you just got to take him at this point. And he had an absolute monster season. Led the NFL in rushing yards that particular year under Josh McDaniels. So always take value where you can see it. I also, try to follow certain strategies. You can go check out my perfect draft article over on Fantasy Pros, but going late round quarterback, I think makes a lot of sense this year. Just the quarterback position is very, very deep. We're going to talk about one of those guys that I really like in the later rounds. And honestly, trying to get your bell cow running back early on. Like we've seen the running backs really bounce back in the last couple of years. Again, even with teams using more than one, we're still seeing the bell cow running backs really thrive, especially as pass catchers out of the backfield. So I find myself getting really queasy if I do a draft and don't have a running back after my first 2 picks. And I know that Fitz and I, we were drafting in the Kings Classic last weekend in Canton, Ohio. And our start, we were picking at the end of the 12-team draft. We went running back. And then we didn't touch running back for a long time. He's like, nope, we got a running back set. And you'll love the receivers that go in those middle rounds. So that's kind of some overarching strategy I'm looking at for 2026 drafts.
All right, here are 3 players. Let's talk about them that if you're in fantasy, that Andrew likes to be targeting for this coming season. Let's start with Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens, who had 86 catches last year, 5 touchdowns, 1,200 yards receiving. This is a new head coach in Baltimore, but you still have obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in Lamar Jackson. What do we think about Zay Flowers? Why are you liking him this year?
I think this is the year he finally blows up. And to make a great comparison, remember when Happy learned how to putt? Well, yep. Zay Flowers is going to learn how to score touchdowns finally this year. That's my prediction here for him. You have Declan Doyle coming in as the new offensive coordinator. Todd Monken is no longer calling the plays here for the Baltimore Ravens. And I just think that invites the possibilities of, let's get our best player on offense the ball more in the red zone. Because if you actually look at last year, the Ravens were not effective in the red zone. They were 27th in red zone scoring. That was just one of the issues that they ran into last year where things got derailed when Lamar Jackson was banged up. But when Lamar was healthy last year, Flowers was hitting nearly 13 points per game in the 13 games he played. He was over 15 points per game in full PPR. I mean, just look at the numbers. He was the only receiver last year to hit at least 1,200 receiving yards and not score at least 8 touchdowns. Right. Wow. So eventually, the talent is so clearly there with him. He's a player that has improved every single season, former first-round pick, entering his 4th year of his NFL career attached to Lamar Jackson. We did see a bit of a touchdown scoring binge over the last part of the 2025 season. He scored 5 touchdowns over the last 4 games. And I think the team's going to remember that and think, man, Zay Flowers is like pretty good. Maybe we should get this guy more involved around the red zone. The consistency and floor is there, which is why I love him so much in fantasy, because let's say I'm wrong here and he doesn't have this, and he just, again, it's another 5 touchdown season. Well, he was a top 7 wide receiver last year with just 5 touchdowns. So I think you're getting him at his absolute floor. He's going well outside the top 12 wide receivers, but a ceiling because of the talent. Again, yards per route run last year, one of the more predicted metrics at receiver, 4th last year behind only Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Luther Burden. Those 2 other guys, those guys are top 5 locked and loaded picks. When it comes to target share, how much is he commanding in this offense? Well, he had a 28% target share. That was 5th in the NFL. And when I just look at the Ravens receiving room, it's Mark Andrews, who I think is totally cooked at this point, and a bunch of rookies, and Rachaad Bateman, who can never stay healthy. So Zay Flowers is I think he's just the perfect player to want to be betting on to take another step forward. And I'm always making the comparison to Antonio Brown in his 4th season. That's who I comped Zay Flowers to coming out of Boston College. And AB just went totally nuclear in the fantasy streets in his 4th season. So I'm predicting something very similar for Flowers.
All right. I love this because I'm with you. I got a prop bet I'm going to give you in a second. I'm questionable. I want to question you about it. But Trevor Lawrence, quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, with arguably the greatest receiver group in the NFL. Over 4,000 yards passing last year, 29 touchdowns. It's year 2 in Liam Cohen's offense. In year 1, the first half of the year was pedestrian. The second half of the year was an absolute, blast off for him in terms of stats and fantasy and wins and everything else. I'm high on Trevor Lawrence. You are too. Why?
From week 5 onward, he outscored every other player in fantasy. Every single one at 23 points per game. We saw him take off in this Liam Cohen offense, despite the fact that there was a rotating carousel of wide receivers. Travis Hunter was there, and then he was out. And then they put Parker Washington in, and Brian Thomas Jr. He was playing through injuries. Bretton Strange, he missed time with injuries. But now the cupboard is stacked with one of the deepest receiver rooms, like you kind of alluded to, where maybe there is no alpha, but hey, you know who's pretty good without an alpha for a really long time? Tom Brady, right? Like, he didn't force feed one particular guy, but he made it work. And that's really what Trevor Lawrence has done for the majority of his career. Some of the guys he's hit big with, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, like tight ends working over the middle of the field. And I think now entering his 2nd season, I get that the Bears are the all-pro hype team. I think the Jaguars deserve more credit because I think that their ceiling can be high, if not higher than the Chicago Bears. And with Trevor Lawrence, look, Liam Cohen, we saw 2 years ago with Baker Mayfield. He threw for over 40 touchdowns in this offense. And I also have a lot of betting stuff with Trevor Lawrence as well. I love him as an MVP dark horse candidate because when you look at Trevor Lawrence, he's only 27 years old. And that is actually the average age of MVP quarterbacks since Tom Brady won his first MVP at age 30. So I get, it feels like the narrative has been written about Trevor Lawrence. He's never really lived up to the number 1 overall pick, but it's like, I don't think his story's been written fully yet. And I think what we saw last year is just a glimpse of what the ceiling can be in this offense. So super high on Trevor Lawrence in fantasy and betting. Yeah.
37.74.5 is the over I played for Trevor Lawrence. I'm really surprised at this number, given the fact that Brian Thomas Jr. and Parker Washington, Travis Hunter will be a nice little gadget guy, and Jacoby Myers is a steady veteran. I mean, those are 4 very good receiving options. I was surprised at how low this number was for Trevor Lawrence. I'm assuming you like the over as well.
Yes, 100%. I think one of the points, too, that you listed off there was we have question marks about the running back room. I like Bayshaw Tootin a lot, but there is a chance that he does not assert himself as a bell cow type of running back. He was a former day 3 pick. I think Chris Rodriguez is just a jag. So if this team can't establish a really effective ground game, well, what does that mean for Trevor Lawrence? It's going to be more dropping back to throw. I expect him to call his name a lot in the red zone, similar to what we've seen with Josh Allen. And defensively, the Jaguars last year were one of the biggest pass funnel defenses, right? So they were selling out to stop the run, and they were welcoming pass attempts. So that to me suggests more shootout game scripts, which means more passing yards for Trevor Lawrence. So I love this bet, Matt.
What round are you recommending Trevor Lawrence? When you said late quarterback, so we talking like 6th, 7th, 8th round for Trevor Lawrence? Are you saying taking him earlier? Should he be QB1? Should he be the first quarterback off the board?
Not the first quarterback off the board, because I still take my boy Drake May over Trevor Lawrence. But when you're considering the price, Trevor Lawrence is more likely to be available in rounds 8, 9, even 10. Like, there are just the quarterback position this year in particular just feels so deep where you can get guys like, I mean, with your last pick, you could probably draft someone like Jared Goff and be like, all right, well, I'll just roll with a guy who basically doesn't play outside until week 18 of this season and just throws for 4,000 yards every year, 30 touchdowns, and I'll be good to go. So I do think I still want Trevor Lawrence, though, in that I'm willing to pay up a little bit for him, but still a round 9 pick. Your roster is going to be mostly filled out by that point anyway. So it's going to be great value for a player that I do think at least will be in that conversation of QB1. And again, Josh Allen, when you compare the prices, I mean, he's someone that's going to go in round 3. And that's just not a bet that I want to make when you can get a player like Lawrence, who I think maybe has a similar ceiling case so many rounds later.
And then finally, a running back that you were liking, Rachaad White from the Tampa Bay Bucks, with the uncertainty with Baker Mayfield as to whether or not he's going to be happy this year. He's not going to be. No Mike Evans. I get this, that the Bucks might be looking to lean more heavily on the running game here. Why do you like White in Tampa to have a breakout season?
So, Matt, this is why you need to make sure that you're in the streets with the Fantasy Pros tools, because Rachaad White is no longer on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh,
he is on the Washington Commanders.
Thank you.
Reuniting with Jaden Daniels. But hey, this is why we got you covered, man. Like, the
Thank
Fantasy Pros tools has these news updates because there are a lot of people that are still coming into fantasy right now that didn't recognize all the player movement. And we have you covered in all these types of avenues. So for me, it's Rachaad White. Again, jettisoned from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Lost his job last year to Bucky Irving, Sean Tucker. But Rachaad White, to me, has been a player that has shown an extremely high floor. He has caught 40 or more passes in 4 straight seasons, which makes him one of the more reliable receiving running backs. Talked about how he's being reunited with Jaden Daniels, where I think their actual college connection actually works well for Rachaad White, because I think gives him an opportunity to see the field. And when you just look at the other players in this backfield, Corey Krosky-Merritt, he was a 7th-round pick last year, had his moments as a rookie, still a day 3 pick. I don't think that he's a super accomplished pass catcher, so I think that White can still have a role. And then you have Katron Allen out of Penn State, a 2-down grinder. That's how he projects. So I think this offense can bounce back in a big way with a healthy Jaden Daniels. And I think Rachaad White, just given the fact that he was much better in an EPA per rush standpoint last year, he was actually really good in the red zone, 2nd in rushing success rate overall because of how well he was effective rushing into the goal line. I think he has touchdown upside, and I think he has a receiving ceiling as well, and an offense that I'm willing to buy back. So Rachaad White, especially when he goes well outside the top 30 running backs, if I had to make a bet on who would be this year's Javonte Williams, kind of like a veteran guy that, all right, hey, we're kind of like over this player, has a major bounce back, it'd be Rachaad White for me.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, like, I'm glad we're talking about this, because I would have said really, because Krosky-Merritt became the darling of the NFL late. I mean, he was, as you mentioned, this guy came out of nowhere, and now he's RB1 in this offense with a running quarterback. So you're not concerned about, the share of running of attempts that we're going to see from White coming in. Will he take over RB1 at some point in your mind in that offense?
I do think that's possible. It is priced into White's ADP, where you're going to be drafting him. He's a late round running back play. But if Krosky-Merritt is only taking on these early down rushing attempts, rushes in between the 20s, we talk about this a lot in fantasy. It's where you want these high value touches. We play in PPR leagues. So Rachaad White could catch a pass for 1 yard. That's a point. If Jacory Krosky-Merritt rushes the ball for 1 yard, that is 0.1 points. Like that is not doing you anything or moving the needle. So I do think Rachaad White can at least capitalize on red zone opportunities and pass catching. And that alone suggests, hey, this guy can be a top 30 running back every year of his career. He's been no worse than RB 38 and half PPR. And we just look at where his ADP, that's where he is. So being drafted at his stone cold floor. And I think that if Krosky-Merritt doesn't take that step forward as a 2nd-year running back, well, I think they'll just turn to the veteran who Jaden Daniels trusts.
Last question before I get you out of here, and we'll do this periodically as we go through August, because we have a question from the audience. McBride is expected to have a monster year for a really bad team in the Arizona Cardinals. What do you make of Bowers and this offense with Kirk Cousins with the Raiders, and how high do you have McBride in terms of being productive this year in this offense, given it's going to be a rough year in Arizona?
I have them as my top 2 tight ends. I do have Bowers 1 spot ahead of Trey McBride, so he is my tight end 1. I am just buying the Clint Kubiak impact on this offense and fading the Nathaniel Hackett. We've seen this guy bounce from team to team, and I know that LaFleur is the head coach and the main play caller, but I don't want any of my fantasy players anywhere near Nathaniel Hackett. I'm just sorry. And the fact that you have a risk of, I don't want Trey McBride catching passes from Carson Beck. Like that scares the bejesus out of me. So I'm very confident that Mendoza will eventually take over as a starting quarterback once the Raiders go through this Kirk Cousins experiment. They figured out, hey, maybe he's not that good anymore. Let's just use our guy that we drafted #1 overall. And just look at last year, Clint Kubiak built the entire Seahawks offense around one guy, JSN. And he was a fantasy football league winner. And when you look at Brock Bowers, it's really not a stretch to could he just be the JSN in this new offense for the Raiders? Yeah, because he's by far their best player, even better than Ashton Genty, in my opinion. So Brock Bowers in year 3, when he was healthy last year, he was still an absolute force. So it's actually funny, Matt, that you mentioned Brock Bowers and Trey McBride when talking about on the Betting Pro show about who could be the first tight end to ever win Offensive Player of the Year. My money would be on Brock Bowers at 80-1.
I mean, okay, hold on.
I mean, JSN won it last year.
Hold on. Brock Bowers is going to have a target share unlike any tight end we've ever seen for that to happen. I mean, you have to be a wide receiver.
Who's the next best receiver? Trey Tucker?
Oh, no, I'm not debating that point, but you're arguing as to, do you want Kirk Cousins or Mendoza? I don't think Mendoza should play the whole year. I don't think he's ready. I don't think Mendoza is ready at all. I would play Kirk Cousins the entire year for the Raiders because I think the Raiders can run the football with Ashton Genty, use the offensive line. They just completely redid their offensive line. Use that, run the ball, play defense, and use Brock Bowers in the red zone. So, wow, you think he could be an offensive player of the year?
I think that his odds are just reflected of him playing tight end. But
true.
When you look at how he plays, he's really more of a receiver. And that's why his odds are so long, because a tight end has never won the award, even during all those Gronk seasons, Jimmy Graham seasons, Antonio, those guys never ended up in that conversation, even Trey McBride last year, but he played on a bad team. So I just think that Brock Bowers is in for something really, really special this season. And I think that in some of these prediction markets where you can sell off some of these, I think that these odds are going to dramatically shift once we see Bowers really tuned up in this offense.
Don't hate the idea of selling it. Don't hate that. Take a position and see how he starts and then kind of be able to maneuver around it. My friend, how can folks get your fantasy stuff if they're getting ready for their leagues? How can they read and watch what you're doing?
You can follow me over on X at Andrew Erickson _. That's kind of my profile across all socials. So whether it's on Blue Sky, Instagram, I'm all over there. When I'm not posting pictures of my dog, Archie Erickson, my golden retriever puppy, I'm talking about something fantasy football related. So, and all my articles, rankings can be found on fantasypros.com, betting content on bettingpros.com. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast as well, where it's 5 days a week. We are just humming along, new shows every single week. I look at them man, another stacked week of shows. So this is the best time to be alive, in my opinion.
It's a lot of fun. On the Juice today, I told everyone to bet Texas to miss the playoffs, by the way. So sorry, I can't follow your Archie love. I can't follow it. I plus 150 Texas to miss the playoffs was a play I made today. So we'll see what happens. Good stuff, my friend. We'll talk soon. All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Andrew Erickson, Fantasy Pros, Betting Pros, joining us here on Pushing the Odds. Great to get him on the